Hello, class. Today we're going to go over mental wellness and isolation. We're going to be learning several things today. We are going to learn the definition of socializing and its purpose. We're going to learn about isolation and how introverts are in the mix. We're going to learn pros and cons of socializing and isolation, and talk a little bit about mental health and physical health. And then we're going to do a brief recap before having some time for questions and a brief assignment at the end of class. So, what is socializing? Well, socializing is basically to interact with others. This can be done one on one or in a group or through electronic devices. It is seen as an everyday thing, part of life that is basically vital. Some examples of socializing would be having dinner with your family, talking to friends over the phone, hanging out with others, speaking to peers. Like if you missed class and have a group chat, you can go to the group chat and ask uh, what notes you missed or if anything important happened today, like a pop quiz. And well, most people, they'll automatically see socializing as a group of friends talking can take like a bunch of different forms, uh, just like the ones I showed right here in the list. Um, the purpose of socializing is a lot like other animals. We are born naturally social creatures. Um, and one of the reasons for this was due to survival, because back then, before a bunch of modern day technology was created, we had to survive in groups. Because if you're on your own, you are less likely to survive because of when you get sick or weak or hurt. You wouldn't have anyone to help you get taken care of. So that leads to the question of what is isolation? Well, isolation is essentially defined as being separated from others. This can be by yourself or it can be caused by other people. It can mean limited contact with people or it can mean no contact at all. Um, it can also be a feeling instead of a literal separation. A person can interact with people on a daily basis and still feel isolated. So, there are many different forms of isolation which can be caused willingly or unwillingly. And some examples would be like being stranded alone. We have staying at home for an extended period of time, cutting off communication with people. Uh, and there are several reasons as to why someone could become isolated. Like if you lost someone really dear to you, or if you have a health issue. And with health, it's not just if your health, like have an immune system. It's not just being at risk that would prevent you from someone else coming close. It's also people who, this is very unfortunate, but this happens, who will judge you based on you being sick and thinking, oh, can't come close to them or else I'll get it. It can also be a trauma response or a reaction to stress. It can be from people being used to just having lack of proper attention growing up, and it can also be caused by anxiety. There is a difference between being introverted and just isolated. Introverts, they prefer to be people who occasionally kind of go off on their own, but this doesn't mean they isolate themselves. They take time to be by themselves, but it's not the same. Introverts, they spend time to recharge and relax and collect their thoughts. But those who isolate themselves are usually doing it to avoid something or to cope. There are pros and cons to socializing, and some of these pros are going to be like making connections or reducing stress, boosting self confidence, and viewing different perspectives. So, stuff like from when we had this class. But a lot of cons would deal with like peer pressure, having social conflicts, using up all your energy trying to keep up with everyone. It can also cause some anxiety of trying to live up to people's expectations of you. The same thing goes for isolation. Isolation can be a good thing if it's handled properly. So some pros would actually be, rest, having some time to think for yourself, getting some privacy. Sometimes people have an increased productivity when they're on their own, but a lot of the cons can be like self-care, negative or dark thoughts, higher risk of certain health issues, and your emotional sensitivity goes way up. Which brings me to mental health. Mental health obviously deals with the brain, but it isn't strictly for mental disorders. You can be mentally unhealthy and not have a mental illness. So, your mental health can lead to affecting your physical health. Some examples of that would be headaches. You can have strokes. You can have a weakened immune system, which leads to a bunch of higher risks for getting sick. You can have an early death at that point. You can also have issues with sleeping or your appetite. You can turn to addictions or alcoholism, and the list goes on. There are ways to break free from being isolated, but it is not an easy task. But there are some examples I'll put on the list, and that is stuff like finding people with similar interests or looking into therapy. There are ways like reaching out to loved ones and seeking help that way. It's proven scientifically that exercise can make you happier. So get outside, exercise a little bit, do yoga or go jogging, uh, practice self care in general. But it is a slow process, and you do not want to jump straight into the big events like going to parties. It could lead to further stress and backpedaling into any spirals, essentially. Um, but improving mental health, it's a slow process, but it reaps a good reward. So, a brief recap as to what we just went over. We have just learned the definition of socializing and its importance. We have gone over what isolation is. We have gone over the reasons for isolation, and we've gone over introverts and isolation. We've done pros and cons of both socializing and isolation. We've gone over a little bit about mental health and mental health with physical health. We've also just went over, how to handle isolation. I want you to take a moment to pause the video and think about any questions you might have. And if you do have questions, feel free to email me. Uh, and then once you're done, we can continue the video. Now onto the assignment. Now that class is over, I just want you to write down a brief paragraph and you can turn it in to me about today's lesson, what you took from it, your perspective and opinion on it. I would love to see any stories you have to share of your own interaction with isolation or people you know who have been isolated before and how you help them or have helped yourself. Um, and with that, it should be the end of the lesson. Thank you for attending this lesson.